Chapter 602 Death of an Ultimate Douluo. Juzi was behind Shu Tianran. This plan had been conceptualized by both of them. Of course, Shu Tianran had this plan all along. She had merely helped him refine and perfect it. It was precisely because of this plan that Shu Tianran was able to fully commit to his decision. The plan had unfolded perfectly, and even the Darkness Holy Dragon was trapped within it. Both Ultimate Douluo from the Holy Ghost Church had fallen into their trap. The Holy Ghost Church was finished. Even if the remaining people were able to run away, they were no longer a threat. Without the two Ultimate Douluo, the Holy Ghost Church was no longer able to threaten the Sun Moon Empire. It would not be too difficult to exterminate the remaining evil soul masters. Right now, the Imperial Dragon Soul Engineer Legion was still by Shu Tianran's side, protecting him. The rest of the three Beast Lord rank Soul Engineer Legions were scattered around the sky above the palace. All of their surveillance soul tools were locked onto this area. If the Darkness Holy Dragon and the Death God Douluo were somehow able to survive their attack, they would receive a final devastating blow from these Soul Engineer Legions. This was the last step of Shu Tianran's plan. A huge number of troops had gathered towards the palace from all directions. The civilians had been escorted out as the troops made sure that there were no trespassers entering the palace right now. Huo Yuao and Tang Wutong were naturally exceptions. Under the protection of his imitation, they were able to enter the cordoned-off area with ease. The bright orange light was still shining at this moment. It was clear how powerful that explosion was. Huo Yuao would definitely not want to try to resist the devastating power within that explosion. The temperature had to be at least a few thousand degrees Celsius. It was not something the human body could withstand. Even an ultimate ice transcendent Douluo like him would not be able to withstand that heat. What a vicious plan. Juzi, was this your plan, or Shu Tianran's? Juzi was also looking at the explosion from the air. Like Shu Tianran, she also revealed a smile. However, her smile was a warm one instead of the chilling laughter that Shu Tianran was giving out. All the important personnel within the palace, including Juzi's son, had already been evacuated. They had only left a few servants and guards to trick the Death God Douluo. At the end of the day, there were a few people who had to die with the Death God Douluo. The two of them had to die. If they were to live, Huo Yuao would have to face them in the near future. Juzi knew that the Death God Douluo would never let Huo Yuao go. Similarly, Huo Yuao would never let her go. The only way to resolve this conflict was that one of them had to die. Yuao, now that I have taken down two of your most powerful enemies, you should be a lot safer. After knowing that the man she loved was in a much safer state now, Juzi was very happy. However, some bitterness was infused into her happiness. The reason was that Huo Yuao would never truly belong to her. However, she was still happy that she could do something for him. This was true even though she knew that he would not want her to help him. Juzi had always enjoyed solving problems through the simplest means. She was happy that the Holy Ghost Church problem was coming to an end. Nonetheless, it was quite a pity that Shu Tianran did not sustain many losses from this incident. There were still several powerful soul masters and soul engineers around him. Of course, Juzi's second plan was about to unfold soon. It was a brilliant plan to destroy the two ultimate Douluo at the expense of the palace. Without the palace, there would be no high energy compression array soul tools. At the same time, the 4 high energy compression array soul tools around Radiant City were already being used to ensure the explosion within the palace did not flatten the entire city. This was the perfect example of a good scheme. Juzi had managed to combine what she wanted to achieve and what would inevitably happen together in her plan. She was able to be righteous while tricking her opponents into her trap. It seemed as though the power of destiny was fueling her schemes. After seeing how successful her plan was, Juzi could not help but smile even wider. Even if that man would never be hers, there was another person who would always be hers. He was none other than her son. Her son's name, Yunan, had a special relationship with Huo Yuao's name. The Yu character in Yua's name was like the rain to the cloud in Yunan's Yun. Hao and Han combined to mean vastness. Shu Tianran naturally did not know what his wife was thinking right now. At this moment, his body was filled with adrenaline. He was so excited to have taken down two ultimate Douluo. This was definitely a first for the Sun Moon Empire. After all, Dubusi had not been killed by him. He had committed suicide. On top of that, he was not an ultimate Douluo. This time round, his achievement would definitely go down in history. He would be revered by future generations. Ha ha ha. Shu Tianran let out a burst of deafening laughter that scared Juzi, who was by his side. Now that the Holy Ghost Church had been destroyed, it's time for us to focus on the Dalu Empire and the Doling Empire. Juzi, I will give you a year to reorganize our troops and replenish them with equipment, manpower, and supplies. A year later, you will set off as the marshal and conquer the entire continent for me. I want the entire Douluo continent to tremble under our feet and shudder under the glow of our soul tools. Once the last empire had been destroyed, we shall rename Douluo continent the Sun Moon continent. But I will not destroy Shrek Academy. Even though they have been going against me, they are still the pinnacle and shrine for all soul masters. At the end of the day, I am also a soul master. Once we have conquered the entire continent, I will make the academy bow down to us. When that happens, I will put on the academy's uniform and attend lessons there. After all, this was my childhood dream. I will then name it the Sun Moon Imperial Academy and make sure it stays a part of our empire forever. They will ensure that we remain a powerful empire for the rest of history. Long live your majesty. Long live your majesty. The soul engineers from the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion cheered in unison. Everyone could see the excitement and anticipation in Shu Tianran's eyes. It was almost as if he had seen the entire continent bow down before him. Even though Kong Deming was standing quietly behind Shu Tianran, his eyes were sparkling with the same excitement as Shu Tianran's. At the end of the day, any citizen of the Sun Moon Empire would be excited by what he had just said. The bright orange light did not start to fade until 15 minutes had passed. Even then, it was fading very slowly. On the other hand, the multi-colored barrier formed by the 4 high-energy compression array soul tools had already become very faint. It had become so thin that its colors were almost no longer visible. The explosion within the barrier was simply too frightening. It was so powerful that the barrier formed by the high-energy compression array soul tools had almost crumbled under its power. Juzi, you were right to direct a huge amount of energy from the high-energy compression array soul tools in the outer city, even though this means that the outer city's high-energy compression array soul tools will need to recharge for a long time. It has allowed us to accomplish our goal. If we had failed to contain the explosion, I believe we would have lost at least a third of Radiant City. It seems like you have made another great contribution again. Tell me, how should I reward you? Juzi smiled and answered politely. As long as your majesty allows me to stay by your side and witness you succeed in conquering the entire continent, that is enough for Juzi. Ha ha ha. You have put it very well. Shu Tianran laughed again. In fact, it had been a while since he had been so pleased and happy. He had not even been this excited back then when he had ascended the throne. The reason was that he was no longer the same person as before. Previously, Shu Tianran was not able to control the entire land before him. Now, he was truly the mightiest emperor in the entire continent. Not only was he able to control the internal affairs within his empire, but he was also able to gain the support and reverence of his ministers and generals. Now that he had conquered the Heavenly Soul Empire and taken down the two ultimate Douluo that were constantly bugging him, how could he not be exhilarated? He no longer wanted to suppress his emotions. This was because there was no longer anyone in this world who could question him. He truly wanted to be the first and mightiest emperor of the entire continent. Shu Tianran was deeply impassioned by Juzi's words as he clenched his fists tightly. If not for his legs, he would definitely have moved out with his troops and witnessed the glorious act of his army trampling over the other empires with his own eyes. As the bright orange light continued to fade, he was slowly able to see the situation within the barrier formed by the high-energy compression array soul tools. The area enveloped by the barrier appeared to be very clean. It did not look like it had just gone through a massive explosion. In fact, the entire ground was sparkling clean. That was because there was no more ground. All that was left was a gigantic crater. Red-hot lava surrounded the incredibly deep crater. The fiery liquid was still flowing within the crater, deepening it. Because of the high temperature of the lava, the light within the barrier was contorted and bent. What was originally the palace now only consisted of the 4 high-energy compression array soul tools at the 4 corners of its compound. They were the only things still intact after the explosion. However, even though soul tools were starting to burn up, traces of black smoke could be seen coming from them. It was apparent that they were starting to break down due to the immense energy released by the explosion. Shu Tianran did not feel that it was a bad deal to trade his palace for 2 ultimate Douluo. This was a loss he could definitely afford. However, it was still undeniable that it was an incredible explosion. 10 class 9 stationary soul cannon shells had been used. The 2 ultimate Douluo should be pleased with how their deaths were celebrated. All 10 stationary soul cannon shells were of the same type. They were all high energy, highly explosive, and heat releasing. Just a single one of them would be sufficient to take down a normal city. One could only imagine the temperature and explosive forces released by 10 of these stationary soul cannon shells compressed within this small area. A god might not even be able to survive this explosion. Shu Tianran was really happy to see how everything had unfolded. Now, all that was left to do was to clean up the mess. Boom. A loud explosion could be heard from within the barrier. It seemed like one of the high-energy compression array soul tools had finally given way and exploded. It released dense black smoke into the air as the multicolored light barrier faded, following which a chain reaction occurred as the three other high-energy compression array soul tools exploded one after another. More black smoke was released into the air. It seemed like all of them had been destroyed by the explosion. However, their purpose had already been realized. At the end of the day, the Sun Moon Empire had paid a hefty price to take down 2 ultimate Douluo. They had lost 2 Class 9 Soul Engineers, a large number of guards and servants within the palace, 4 of the latest high-energy compression array soul tools, and 10 Class 9 stationary soul cannon shells. The value of these things would have been enough to build a huge city from scratch. However, Shu Tianran was still very happy. After all, the 2 ultimate Douluo would have been able to destroy more than a huge city if they were to combine their powers. Without the multicolored barrier, the heat from the explosion instantly surged out and scattered in all directions. At that instant, the ambient temperature within the entire radiant city seemed to have risen by quite a bit. The places which were nearer to the palace became incredibly sweltering. This was inevitable. Fortunately, Shu Tianran had prepared for this. He had organized a team to project beams of water into the huge crater within the palace. Huge amounts of steam were released at that moment. It was truly an impressive sight to behold. Shu Tianran, who was still floating in the air, smiled at Juzi and said, "When we rebuild the palace, there is no longer a need to excavate. It is now a lot deeper than before. In fact, the underground walls should be incredibly tough now that they have been baked by the heat." Suddenly, the beeping sound of an alarm could be heard. The sound immediately alerted all the Soul Engineers from the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion, who had been starting to lower their guard. They instantly activated their linked defensive barriers to protect Shu Tianran, Juzi, and the rest. The Emperor's safety was of the utmost importance. "What's going on?" Shu Tianran exclaimed, "Your Majesty, we have detected soul power and spiritual power fluctuations from the crater. The fluctuations are of incredible magnitude, and they are enveloping the entire palace." One of the Soul Engineers reported to Shu Tianran, now that the Sun Moon Empire had installed surveillance soul tools above the palace, they were able to detect any movement or changes instantly. Shu Tianran was visibly frustrated by the news. "Attack. I want all of you to launch an all-out attack on the palace." He did not dare to imagine what would happen if both ultimate Douluo were still alive. Suddenly, the steam turned into countless snowflakes. Huge snowflakes began to dance above the palace, and their extremely cold auras chased away the intense heat which was radiating from the crater. At the same time, they prevented the surveillance soul tools from monitoring the events unfolding within the crater. A series of loud explosions continued to ring in the air as the crater within the palace became deeper with the attacks which thrown into it by the Soul Engineers. All sorts of lights from the explosions crushed the snowflakes as Radiant City trembled under the explosive power of the Imperial Soul Engineer Legion. Juzi could not help but clench her fists at the sight of this. She naturally recognized those snowflakes. "Idiot. Why are you here right now? Are you actually trying to save the death god Douluo? Why?" Of course, Hua Yuan would not be giving her an answer. The reason was that both he and Tang Wutong had already disappeared with the 2 ultimate Douluo when the cannons were fired. The security established by the troops was nothing when it was up against Hua Yuan's imitation and spiritual interference domain. The clothes on Long Xiaoyao's body had already disappeared. What was left were just the burnt black dragon scales on his body. On the other hand, Yi Shishui's body seemed to be giving off a radiant aura. At this moment, she seemed to have become a holy angel of sorts. However, her body was somewhat translucent. The blood soul demon puppet aura on her body had vanished completely. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.